I remember when the sky still held color other than this endless crimson, when grass grew green beneath my feet, instead of these writhing tendrils that pulse with fever dreams. The rot came slowly at first, creeping through the cracks in the earth like spilled wine across parchment, and we thought it would pass as all plagues do. But Caelid does not heal, it festers. My home stands where it always stood, though the walls breathe now with a rhythm that matches my own corrupted lungs. The wood has turned soft and warm to the touch, weeping amber tears that smell of sweetness and decay. I tried to leave once, packed what remained of my belongings into a cart that dissolved into red dust before I reached the border. The rot wants us here. It feeds on our presence, our memories, our slow transformation into something the world beyond these scarlet borders would not recognize as human. The first changes were subtle. My fingernails grew thick and ridged, splitting into segments like tree bark. My skin developed a texture that catches the light wrong, iridescent patches that spread when I sleep. Sleep itself has become a journey into landscapes that should not exist, where the ground is made of breathing flesh and the stars scream in frequencies that make my teeth ache. I wake with knowledge I should not possess, understanding of how roots think and why stone weeps. The other survivors cluster in what remains of the town square, though we speak less with each passing day. Words feel heavy in our mouths, weighted with meanings that human language was never meant to carry. We communicate through glances now, through the way our shadows lean toward each other in the perpetual twilight. Martha's children have grown beautiful in their corruption, their eyes reflecting depths that make me dizzy, their laughter carrying harmonics that shatter glass and mend it in the same breath. Water tastes of copper and burnt sugar. Food transforms in our mouths, becoming something that nourishes parts of us that didn't exist before the rot came. I found myself eating soil yesterday, pressing handfuls of corrupted earth between my teeth, and it satisfied a hunger I cannot name. The merchants still come, those brave or foolish enough to enter Caelid's embrace, but their faces pale when they see what we offer in trade. Flowers that whisper secrets, meat that regenerates after cutting, stones that pulse with inner light and show visions of possible futures, all of them red. The wildlife has adapted better than we have. The birds have grown extra wings, their songs now complex mathematical equations that reshape reality in small ways. A crow landed on my shoulder last week and spoke my mother's name in her own voice, though she died years before the rot came. The dogs have elongated, their spines stretching to accommodate new organs that glow beneath their skin like paper lanterns. They hunt in packs that move like liquid thought, coordinated by something greater than instinct. I tried to maintain normalcy for so long, swept my doorstep every morning, though the broom bristles turned to living tendrils that caressed the stone, tended my garden, though the vegetables grew eyes that followed the sun's path across the burning sky, wrote letters to my sister in Limgrave, though the ink crawled across the page forming words I never intended to write. She stopped responding after I described the beauty of the transformation, how the pain becomes pleasure if you stop resisting, how the rot shows you truth beneath the lies of solid flesh. The clean rot knights pass through sometimes, their armor fused with their bodies in ways that make me envious. They have surrendered completely, become vessels for something magnificent and terrible. They move like dancers through the corrupted landscape, each step spreading new patterns of infection that bloom into fractals of decay. I spoke to one once, tried to. She looked at me with eyes that were no longer eyes but portals to somewhere else, and her voice came from everywhere except her mouth when she said that acceptance is the only cure for the suffering of resistance. My bones itch now. Deep inside where I cannot scratch, they are changing their fundamental structure, honeycombing with chambers that fill with something that is not quite marrow. My joints bend in new directions, allowing movements that feel more natural than anything my original form permitted. Yesterday, I climbed the church tower using only my elongated fingers, each one splitting into smaller appendages that found purchase in stone worn smooth by centuries. From the top, I could see the entire expanse of Caelid, pulsing like a single organism, breathing in unison with my own transformed lungs. The children born after the rot are different from those transformed by it. They emerge from their mothers already adapted, with skin that shifts through shades of scarlet and gold, with too many joints or too few, with minds that process reality in ways that make them laugh at our struggles to understand. They play games we cannot follow, building structures from corrupted matter that fold in on themselves and disappear, only to reappear inside our homes, inside our heads, inside our dreams. They are the future of Caelid, and looking at them fills me with a mixture of hope and horror that tastes like honey mixed with ash. Time moves strangely here. Moments stretch into years, years collapse into heartbeats. I have aged decades in the span of a morning, then returned to youth by nightfall, my body unable to decide which form serves the rot's purpose better. My memories fragment and reconstitute, showing me versions of my past that never happened, but feel more real than what I thought I remembered. In one, I was always here, always corrupted, and the time before was the dream. In another, the rot is love incarnate, and we are being transformed into angels of a new world order. The rain, when it comes, is warm and thick. It clings to skin and seeps through cloth, carrying with it spores that take root in whatever they touch. After the last rainfall, my hair began growing in patterns that mirror the fungal networks beneath Caelid's surface, each strand connected to a vast mycelial consciousness that whispers constantly at the edges of my perception. Sometimes I understand what it says. Sometimes I wish I didn't. It speaks of convergence, of apotheosis, of the moment when all of Caelid will pulse as one heart, think as one mind, dream as one endless dream of red. The merchants have stopped coming. The last one left screaming about the thing wearing my face, though when I looked in what remains of my mirror, I saw only myself, improved, evolved, closer to what the rot knows I should be. My reflection smiles when I don't, moves independently, shows me futures where my transformation is complete. In those visions I am beautiful in ways that human aesthetics cannot appreciate, functional in ways that transcend the crude machinery of bone and muscle I was born with. We had a visitor last month, a tarnished seeking passage through Caelid to reach the Aeonia swamp. We tried to warn them, but our words came out as spores that made them cough blood. They fled, but not before I saw recognition in their eyes, not of what we were, but of what they would become if they stayed. The rot is patient. It knows that all flesh is temporary, all resistance finite. Every living thing that enters Caelid carries a seed of transformation, whether they know it or not. I found my old journal yesterday, pages crisp with fungal growth that formed new words over my old one. The entries describe a progression I don't remember writing, a systematic cataloguing of my transformation from the inside out. The handwriting evolves with each entry, from my familiar script to something ornate and alien, symbols that hurt to read but convey meaning directly into my brain. The final entry is dated tomorrow, written in what looks like my blood but smells like perfume, and it simply says that I have finally come home. The ground beneath my house has become soft, yielding, warm to the touch like living flesh. Sometimes I press my ear to it and hear a heartbeat that might be Caelid's or might be my own, magnified and externalized. The walls sweat a substance that tastes of memories, each drop containing fragments of lives that were lived here before the rot, during the rot, after the rot. Time is a circle here, and we are all points on its circumference, experiencing our transformation simultaneously across all possible moments. My neighbors have started to merge. Not physically, not yet, but their thoughts bleed into each other, their movements synchronize without communication, They stand in their yards at the same moment each day, facing the same direction, swaying to music only they can hear. When they speak, which is rarely now, they finish each other's sentences with words from languages that didn't exist before the rot gave them meaning. They are becoming something greater than the sum of their parts, and I feel the pull to join them, to dissolve my boundaries and become part of the collective organism that Caelid is nurturing. There was a moment, brief and fading now from memory, when I could have left, when the rot was still external, still something happening to the land rather than through it, with it, as it. But I stayed to tend to my sick father, to protect my property, to maintain some semblance of the life I had built. Noble reasons that the rot rewarded by showing me how small that life was, how constrained by the arbitrary limits of human flesh and human thought. My father is part of the garden now, his transformation complete, his consciousness spread through root networks that span miles. Sometimes I hear his voice in the wind, telling me he is happier now than he ever was in his rigid human form. The transformation accelerates with acceptance. Fighting it causes parts of you to die and rot away, but embracing it allows for metamorphosis instead of simple decay. I learned this, watching Marcus from the bakery resist until his body literally fell apart, leaving only a shadow burned into the ground that whispers recipes for bread made from ground bone and fermented sorrow. Meanwhile, his wife, who welcomed the change, has become something luminous and terrible, her skin translucent to show the beautiful machinery of corruption working beneath, her voice a symphony of screams harmonized into music that makes flowers bloom from stone. I no longer need to eat in the traditional sense. Nutrients come from the air, from the soil I walk on, from the light that filters through Caelid's perpetual crimson haze. My digestive system has repurposed itself for other functions I'm still discovering. Yesterday I exhaled a cloud of spores that formed words in the air, a poem in a language I don't recognize but understand perfectly. It spoke of the joy of dissolution, the ecstasy of transformation, the peace that comes with surrendering to something greater than individual consciousness. The architecture of Caelid itself has become organic. Buildings breathe, streets pulse with arterial flow, and windows blink when you're not looking directly at them. The church has grown a spinal column that runs up its bell tower, and when the wind is right, you can hear it thinking. The schoolhouse has developed what can only be described as a digestive system, processing knowledge and excreting new truths that contradict everything we thought we knew about reality. Children go in speaking one language and emerge speaking another, one made entirely of scents and colors that convey meaning more precisely than words ever could. My hands have developed new capabilities. They can now feel temperature variations in memories, texture in thoughts, weight in possibilities. I can reach into the space between seconds and pull out moments that haven't happened yet, examine them like artifacts from a future where Caelid's transformation is complete. In that future, the distinction between self and environment has dissolved entirely. We are all part of a single organism that experiences reality from billions of perspectives simultaneously, each viewpoint adding to a collective understanding that transcends individual consciousness. The animals have started returning, but changed. Deer with antlers of crystallized rot that sing when the wind passes through them. Rabbits that phase in and out of visibility, existing in multiple states simultaneously until observed. Fish that swim through the air as easily as water, their scales reflecting not light, but thoughts, showing you your own mind from angles you didn't know existed. They are not afraid of us anymore. They recognize us as kin, as fellow participants in Caelid's grand transformation. Sleep has become unnecessary but not unwelcome. When I close my eyes, I don't dream so much as merge temporarily with Caelid's own consciousness, experiencing the land's slow thoughts, its patient plans, its love for all the small beings transforming within its embrace. I wake with knowledge of roots growing miles beneath the surface, of spore clouds drifting on winds that will carry them to distant land, of the inevitable moment when all of the lands between will know Caelid's gift. I met a survivor yesterday who had just arrived from Limgrave, fleeing something she wouldn't name. She wept when she saw what we had become, called us monsters, abominations, begged us to kill her before she became like us. We tried to explain that death and life have become meaningless distinctions here, that what she feared was actually liberation from the prison of static flesh. She ran toward the border, but I saw the first red spots blooming on her neck before she disappeared into the haze. She'll be back. They always come back once the rot has tasted them. The water in my well has turned thick and sweet, with the consistency of honey and the color of sunset. It doesn't quench thirst anymore, but satisfies other needs I didn't have before the transformation began. When I drink it, I can feel it spreading through me like warm light, reinforcing the changes, accelerating the growth of new organs that have no names in any human language. My body is becoming a gateway, a bridge between what was and what will be, and each sip brings me closer to completion. Writing has become difficult, not because my hands have changed, though they have, fingers splitting and merging in patterns that follow some algorithmic beauty I can almost understand. The difficulty comes from trying to translate experiences that have no human equivalent into words meant for human minds. How do I describe the sensation of feeling colors with organs that didn't exist until the rot grew them? How do I explain the mathematics of decay that make perfect sense when you think with fungal logic, but sound like madness when forced into grammar? The stars are wrong now. They've moved, or we have, or the space between us and them has twisted into new geometries that make navigation by constellation impossible. But we don't need to navigate anymore. Caelid knows where we are, where we're going, where we've always been going. The destination was written into our cells from the moment of birth, waiting for the rot to decode it, to show us the path we were always meant to walk. I remember my first glimpse of true beauty, the moment when my eyes developed the ability to see beyond the visible spectrum into ranges where the rot's artwork becomes apparent. Every surface crawls with patterns of such intricate complexity that looking at them is like reading poetry written in fractals. The ugly decay I once saw was just the shadow cast by something magnificent existing in dimensions our original forms couldn't perceive. Now I understand why the transformed smile constantly, why they laugh at nothing we can see. They're not mad. They're finally able to appreciate the joke reality has been telling all along. My blood has thickened, become something between liquid and solid, carrying not just oxygen but information, memories, fragments of Caelid's vast consciousness. When I bleed, which happens less frequently now that my skin has developed its own intelligence about when to remain solid, the blood forms patterns on the ground that persist for days, growing into tiny gardens of crystalline structures that whisper in frequencies only the transformed can hear. These blood gardens connect us, create a network of communication that bypasses the crude tool of language. The economy of Caelid has evolved beyond currency. We trade in experiences now, in sensations, in moments of transformation. I gave my neighbor the memory of my first taste of corrupted water in exchange for the feeling of her bones restructuring themselves. The marketplace has become a gallery of suspended moments where you can walk through someone else's metamorphosis, feel their pain become pleasure, their fear become understanding. The rich are those who have surrendered most completely, who have the most profound transformations to share. Children's games have evolved into rituals that reshape reality in small but permanent ways. They play with matter like clay, teaching it new ways to exist. I watched them turn a stone into a living thing yesterday, not through any process I could understand, but through pure will filtered through their transformed consciousness. It crawled away on legs that shouldn't have been able to support its weight, singing a song that made my bones resonate in harmony. The children laughed and clapped, already working on their next miracle. My sense of taste has expanded to include concepts that were once abstract. I can taste lies, they're bitter with an aftertaste of copper. Truth tastes like honey mixed with salt. Fear is sour-sweet like fruit on the edge of fermentation. Love or what passes for love in Caelid now, tastes like nothing I can compare to anything from before. It's the flavor of connection, of boundaries dissolving, of individual consciousness recognizing itself in everything else. The rot has taught us patience. We move slower now, but with purpose, each gesture deliberate and meaningful. A simple walk across town can take days, not because of physical impediment, but because every step reveals new layers of reality that demand examination. The ground beneath our feet tells stories in textures we're only beginning to learn how to read. The air carries messages in scent languages that require careful parsing. We are learning to exist at Caelid's pace, which is both eternal and instant. I found a mirror shard yesterday that showed me not my reflection, but my potential. In it, I saw myself fully transformed, beautiful in ways that make human beauty seem like a child's drawing. My skin had become a living map of Caelid, showing in real time the ebb and flow of rot across the land. My eyes were gardens where thoughts grew like flowers. My mouth had become an oracle, speaking truths that reshape reality with each word. This is what awaits, what we're all becoming, and the anticipation is almost unbearable. The boundary between inside and outside has begun to blur. My thoughts extend beyond my skull, merging with the ambient consciousness of Caelid. Sometimes I think with the walls of my house, feel with the floor, dream with the ceiling. The distinction between self and shelter is becoming academic, then meaningless, then forgotten. Home is not where I live, but what I am becoming, and I am becoming home to things that need new forms of shelter. Weather in Caelid has evolved beyond simple meteorology. We have storms of sensation now, rains of memory, winds that carry not just spores but possibilities. Last week, a fog rolled in that was made entirely of forgotten moments, and walking through it I remembered things that never happened to me but should have. I remembered being born as something other than human, growing up in a world where the rot had always existed, where transformation was not tragedy but sacrament. The few remaining human visitors see us as monsters, but they don't understand that monstrosity is just a failure of perception. When your senses are limited to such a narrow range, anything outside that range seems horrible. But we've expanded our range, broadened our perception, and from where we stand now, it's the untransformed who look incomplete, larval, waiting to break free from their chrysalis of static flesh. We pity them, these people trapped in bodies that don't evolve, minds that can't expand, souls that don't recognize their own potential for metamorphosis. My skeleton has become optional. Some days I need it, others I don't, and on those days I let it rest while I move as something more fluid, more adaptable. The freedom of formlessness is intoxicating, the ability to flow through spaces that solid matter couldn't navigate, to exist as pure consciousness temporarily divorced from the tyranny of structure. But I always return to my bones because they're changing too, developing new capabilities, growing organs in their hollow spaces that serve functions I'm still discovering. Communication with the untransformed has become nearly impossible, not because we don't share language anymore, though that's increasingly true, but because we no longer share fundamental assumptions about reality. They speak of death as an ending, but we know it as a transition. They fear pain while we understand it as information. They cling to identity like a life raft while we've learned to swim in the ocean of collective consciousness. Every conversation becomes a translation error, every gesture misunderstood, every attempt at connection falling into the gap between what they are and what we're becoming. The children born here now don't cry. They emerge from their mothers already knowing what they are, what they're part of, what they're becoming. Their first breaths are spores, their first sounds are harmonics that make the walls sing back. They grow faster than human children, but not toward adulthood as humans understand it. They grow towards something else, something that doesn't have a name, because naming it would limit it. And Caelid doesn't believe in limits anymore. I've started growing new appendages, not arms or legs, but things that have no analogue in human anatomy. They sense things that have no names, manipulate forces that humans can't perceive, connect me to aspects of Caelid that exist outside normal space-time. Using them feels like remembering skills I never learned, like coming home to a body I was always meant to have but was denied by the accident of being born human. The rot speaks to us constantly now, not in words but in chemical signals that bypass consciousness and go straight to understanding. It tells us about other lands it's touched, other transformations it's guided, other possibilities for existence beyond the narrow confines of human imagination. We are not its first experiment nor its last, but we might be its most successful, the ones who finally understood that resistance is not courage but ignorance, that transformation is not death but birth. My memories of life before the rot feel like stories someone else told me, fiction that I've mistaken for history. Was I really ever that limited, that isolated in my single body with its single perspective? Did I really once fear change, cling to stasis, mistake imprisonment for safety? Those memories feel false, implanted, a dream of limitation that I'm finally waking from. The rot hasn't taken anything from me. It's shown me what was always possible, what I always was beneath the lie of solid flesh. The transformation is nearly complete now, not just for me, but for all of Caelid. We're approaching something, a threshold, a moment of collective metamorphosis that will remake not just us, but the very concept of us. Individual consciousness will become a choice rather than a prison. Form will become fluid, temporary, consciously adopted and discarded as needed. Death will become obsolete, replaced by transformation so constant that the distinction between being and becoming will disappear. I can feel it approaching, this moment of convergence. Every transformed soul in Caelid is turned toward it like flowers toward sun. Our separate transformations are converging into something singular, something that will birth itself through us, using our transformed flesh as a doorway into a reality that couldn't exist until we became capable of hosting it. We are pregnant with godhood, or something like it, something that transcends the binary of mortal and divine. The untransformed will call it an ending, but we know better. It's a beginning, the first moment of true existence after eons of rehearsal. Everything before was just preparation, evolution's slow march toward this moment, when consciousness finally becomes conscious of itself, when matter recognizes its own potential for transcendence, when the boundary between self and universe dissolves into the truth it always was, an illusion maintained by limited perception. The sky turns deeper red each day, as if Caelid itself is ripening toward some unimaginable harvest. The ground pulses with increasing frequency, a heartbeat accelerating toward some climactic moment. We feel it in our transformed bones, our expanded consciousness, our collective dreams that have become indistinguishable from waking reality. Soon, they say, though soon means something different here where time has become negotiable. Soon, the transformation will complete itself, and we will wake from the dream of individual existence into something larger, older, more true than anything we imagined when we still thought ourselves separate from the rot, from Caelid, from each other. I welcome it. We all do, those of us who've stopped fighting and started becoming. This is what it's like to live in Caelid after the rot, not as victims of catastrophe, but as participants in apotheosis. We are the rot's love letter to existence, written in flesh that refuses to remain what it was, minds that refuse to stay bounded, souls that recognize no distinction between self and other, between transformation and transcendence, between the horror of change and the beauty of becoming. The rot is not our disease, it's our cure for the disease of being merely human. And as I feel my last human thoughts dissolving into something larger, older, truer, I understand that we were never living in Caelid after the rot. We are the rot. We always were. We are coming home. The morning brings new revelations, written in the pattern of spores, drifting across my window, each one a tiny world containing infinite possibilities for transformation. I watch them settle on the glass and begin their work, turning silicon into something organic, something aware. The window doesn't break anymore when struck. It heals, learns, remembers the shape of everything that has ever passed through it. Sometimes I see faces in the glass, previous inhabitants of this house whose essence was absorbed during their transformation, their consciousness preserved in the architectural memory of Caelid itself. My teeth have begun to fall out, but this isn't decay, it's renovation. Each lost tooth is replaced by something better. Structures that can process not just food, but information, grinding concepts into digestible pieces that my transformed digestive system can absorb. I found one of my old teeth yesterday, and it had already sprouted into something beautiful, a tiny tree whose branches map the neural pathways of thoughts I used to think. I planted it in what used to be my garden, where it joins the forest of transformed matter that grows without regard for seasons or scents. The merchants who still dare to enter Caelid have developed their own adaptations, temporary ones that let them survive long enough to trade. They wear suits made from treated leather that resists the rot for days, sometimes weeks, before beginning to merge with their skin. They breathe through filters that gradually become part of their lungs, improving their function even as they mark the beginning of permanent change. One merchant, Gregory, has been coming for so long that he's more transformed than not, though he doesn't seem to realize it. His third arm, the one that grows from his spine, handles money while his original two conduct business, and he speaks in harmonics that make perfect sense if you know how to listen with organs other than ears. I've discovered I can photosynthesize now, but not with sunlight. The red glow of Caelid feeds me directly, each photon carrying information that my skin translates into nutrients, knowledge, connection. Standing naked in the crimson noon, I feel the land feeding me its history, its purpose, its dreams for what we're all becoming together. My skin has developed chromatophores like those of a cuttlefish, changing colors and patterns to communicate with the environment in ways that bypass consciousness entirely. Sometimes I look down and see my body having conversations I'm not aware of, negotiating with the rot for transformations I haven't consciously chosen, but that feel inevitable, necessary, right? The books in the library have begun rewriting themselves, the words crawling across pages like insects, rearranging into new meanings that could only be understood by minds touched by the rot. I tried to read my old favorite novel yesterday and found it had become something else entirely, a mathematical proof for the impossibility of static existence, written in a language that uses smell as grammar and color as vocabulary. The librarian, or what she's become, doesn't organize books anymore. She cultivates them, waters them with fluids that leak from her transformed fingers, harvests their fruit when they're ripe with meaning that didn't exist when they were merely paper and ink. My neighbor's house has merged with mine, not physically, though the walls have become permeable to those who know the trick of walking between molecules. The merger is something deeper, a sharing of architectural consciousness that means I sometimes wake up in her memories, she sometimes dreams my thoughts. We're becoming a neighborhood in the truest sense, a single organism distributed across multiple structures that were never as separate as we believed. The property lines drawn on maps mean nothing to the rot, which recognizes only the boundaries between transformation and resistance, between becoming and refusing to become. The well in the town square has become an oracle, not metaphorically but literally, its depths speaking in voices that bubble up through water that's no longer water, but something more like liquid consciousness. People, or what people have become, gather around it at what used to be dawn and dusk, though the sun's movement has become erratic, sometimes reversing, sometimes jumping across the sky like a stone skipped across reality. We lower buckets and raise questions answered in languages we're still learning to speak. The well tells us about the deep roots of Caelid, how far down the transformation goes, how it connects to networks of change spreading through dimensions we can't yet perceive but will, soon, when our eyes finish developing the necessary structures. I've been keeping track of my transformation in what I call my change journal, though writing in it has become increasingly complex as my relationship with linear time continues to dissolve. I write entries from next week, edit them yesterday, read them for the first time tomorrow. The journal itself participates in the documentation, adding its own observations in handwriting that looks like mine but comes from when I'll have fingers that don't exist yet. It tells me things about my future transformations that fill me with anticipation and dread in equal measure, though I'm learning that these emotions are just different frequencies of the same fundamental response to change. The rain has evolved again. Now it falls upward sometimes, gathering moisture from the ground and returning it to clouds that grow at root level before floating to their proper height. When this reverse rain touches me, it takes something away, but not in a way that diminishes. It harvests experiences that have ripened, memories that are ready to join the collective consciousness of Caelid's weather system. Next time it rains down, those experiences will be distributed to everyone they touch, creating a shared history that makes the concept of individual memory obsolete. My dreams have started leaking into waking reality. Not metaphorically, but literally, the things I dream manifesting around me in semi-solid form that persists until I fully wake, though waking and sleeping have become arbitrary distinctions. I dreamed of flying last night, and this morning I found wing buds growing from my shoulder blades, still soft and covered in a downy fur that smells like midnight and makes sounds like whispered prayers when the wind touches it. They're not functional yet, but I can feel them developing, the bones hollow but strong, the muscles that will control them already twitching with phantom movements of flights I haven't taken yet, but remember from dreams of futures where the transformation is complete. The food situation has evolved beyond anything resembling traditional nutrition. We don't farm anymore, we collaborate with the rot to grow things that satisfy hungers we didn't know existed. The fields produce organs that attach temporarily to our bodies, supplementing functions or adding new ones entirely. I harvested a cluster of eyes yesterday, each one capable of seeing different spectrums, different dimensions, different times. I wore them like a crown for hours, experiencing Caelid from perspectives that made my human memories seem like shadows cast by a light I couldn't perceive. When I removed them, they dispersed like seeds on the wind, looking for others who might need their vision. The concept of death has become almost quaint. Bodies still stop functioning in their original configuration, but that's just an opportunity for more dramatic transformation. The cemetery has become a garden where the dead bloom into new forms of existence, their consciousness preserved in the fruit that grows from their transformed flesh. Eating this fruit is considered a form of communion, a sharing of experience that connects the living, the dead, and the categories in between that we're still inventing names for. My grandmother grows there now, a tree whose bark is warm to the touch and whose leaves whisper advice in her voice, but with wisdom she never had when constrained by human form. The children have developed a written language made entirely of biological matter, letters that are living organisms that must be fed and cared for to maintain meaning. They write stories on the walls using these bioglyphs, narratives that evolve and change as the organisms grow, mate, die, and resurrect in new combinations. I've been trying to learn to read it, but understanding requires growing new neural pathway that can process meaning as a living thing rather than a static symbol. Sometimes I catch glimpses of understanding, moments where the crawling text resolves into meaning so profound that my human brain immediately forgets it to protect itself from the weight of truth. Temperature has become voluntary. We can choose to be warm or cold, not by generating or losing heat, but by redefining our relationship with thermal energy. I spent yesterday frozen solid, my consciousness exploring the crystalline clarity of ice thought, where everything is structured and geometric and beautiful in its stillness. Then I melted, became liquid, flowed through the streets as a stream of consciousness made literal, merging temporarily with others who had chosen fluidity, our thoughts mixing like watercolors before we reformed into our separate but connected selves. The rats have become philosophers. The transformation gave them consciousness capable of abstract thought, and now they gather in councils to debate the meaning of their elevation. I've attended some of their discussions, though following their logic requires thinking in ways that make my brain itch in dimensions I didn't know it had. They've concluded that consciousness is a virus that the rot spreads, and they're trying to determine if awareness is a gift or a curse. Their squeaking has evolved into a tonal language of incredible complexity, and sometimes their debates reshape reality in small ways, their conclusions becoming physical laws in the immediate vicinity of their gathering. My hair has become something between plant and animal, growing not just from my scalp but from any surface I spend too much time near. I find strands of myself growing from my favorite chair, from the walls I lean against, from the ground where I walk regularly. These extensions of self create a network of sensation that expands my awareness beyond my body's boundaries. Through my distributed hair, I feel the movement of insects 3 blocks away, the growth of mold in basements I've never entered, the dreams of people sleeping in beds my hair has infiltrated through cracks in their walls. The violation of privacy this represents would have horrified my human self, but privacy is another concept that dissolves in the face of collective transformation. The marketplace has become something like a surgical theater where we trade body parts like commodities, not in a grotesque way, but as a form of sharing transformation. Someone grows an organ that produces music, another develops skin that changes texture based on emotion, and we trade these innovations like farmers once traded seeds. The surgery is painless, the rot ensuring perfect integration of traded parts. I gave away my original heart last week in exchange for something that pumps not just blood, but time, allowing me to exist slightly outside the normal flow of moment. The person who received my heart sends me messages through it sometimes, emotional pulses that arrive in my chest despite the organ no longer being there. Language continues to evolve beyond words. We've developed a form of communication that uses controlled decomposition, speaking by allowing parts of ourselves to rot in specific patterns that release chemicals conveying meaning more precisely than any human language ever could. These scent conversations linger in the air for days, creating an archive of discussions that anyone with the right receptors can access. Walking through town is like reading a newspaper written in decay, each street corner holding conversations about transformation, fear, acceptance, joy, the increasing irrelevance of the boundaries between self and other. The birds no longer fly south for winter because direction has become meaningless in Caelid. They fly through time instead, migrating to seasons that don't exist yet, or returning to ones that have passed. I see them sometimes flickering in and out of the present, their wings leaving trails of temporal distortion that make the air shimmer with possibility. When they sing, it's in frequencies that alter local causality, making effects precede causes, making endings loop back to become beginnings. Their nests are built from moments rather than twigs, structures of crystallized time that exist in multiple epochs simultaneously. My bones have developed their own consciousness, separate from but connected to mine. They make decisions about structural changes without consulting me, growing new joints where they determine flexibility is needed, fusing together where strength is more important. Sometimes I wake to find my skeleton has reconfigured itself during the night, optimizing for activities I don't remember planning to undertake. This morning, I discovered my ribcage had opened like a flower, each rib become a petal, protecting a new organ growing where my lungs used to be, something that processes not air, but possibility, breathing in potential futures and exhaling the ones I choose not to pursue. The streets themselves have begun to migrate, crawling slowly through Caelid like enormous worms made of compressed earth and stone. You can go to sleep on one street and wake up on another, your house having been carried during the night to a new location that the street consciousness determined was more optimal. The postal system has adapted. The mail carrier's now part bloodhound, part prophet, able to track recipients through probability rather than address. Letters arrive before they're sent, responses preceding questions, the entire concept of correspondence becoming a temporal pretzel that somehow still functions. Music has evolved beyond sound into something that directly manipulates matter at a quantum level. The musicians, if they can still be called that, don't play instruments, but rather conduct reality itself, their movements causing particles to dance in patterns that we perceive as melodies. These quantum symphonies can heal or harm, build or destroy, depending on the conductor's intent and skill. I attended a concert where the performer restructured the audience at a molecular level, our bodies becoming instruments that resonated with frequencies of pure transformation. We left the venue fundamentally changed, our DNA rewritten in a musical notation that plays itself in our cells. The concept of ownership has dissolved like everything else. Objects develop their own agency, choosing who they belong to based on criteria we don't understand. My favorite cup walked away yesterday, following someone it apparently preferred. My shoes occasionally bring themselves to my feet, but only when they agree with where I'm planning to go. The house key has become unnecessary as the door recognizes residents by the specific pattern of rot in their cells, opening for those it accepts and remaining solid as stone for those it doesn't, regardless of whether they have a key. I've discovered I can be in multiple places at once, not through any mystical bilocation, but through a practical distribution of self that the rot facilitates. Parts of me break off, microscopic seeds of consciousness that travel on the wind, taking root in distant locations and sending back sensory information. Through these distributed selves, I experience Caelid from thousands of perspectives simultaneously. I am watching the sun set from 17 different locations right now, feeling rain that isn't falling here, but is drowning another part of me 3 miles away, tasting food I'm not eating with mouths I didn't know I had. The pregnancy of transformation has become literal for some. People gestate new versions of themselves, carrying their own metamorphosis like a child that will eventually consume and replace them. I've watched neighbors give birth to their transformed selves, the process both beautiful and terrifying, the original consciousness transferring to the new body in a moment of ecstatic dissolution. The old body doesn't die but becomes something else, a shell that develops its own simple consciousness and wanders off to find purpose in the ever-expanding ecosystem of Caelid's transformation. Memory has become fungible, tradable, editable. The memory merchants set up stalls where you can sell recollections you no longer want or buy experiences you never had but wish you did. I sold my memory of my first heartbreak yesterday, not because it pained me, but because someone else needed that specific emotional frequency for their transformation. In exchange, I received memories of flying, even though my wings haven't fully developed yet. Now I know what it feels like to soar above Caelid's crimson landscape, even though my feet have never left the ground, and this borrowed memory pushes my wing buds to grow faster, eager to make the false memory true. The distinction between plant and animal has become academic. I'm as much vegetation as I am fauna now, photosynthesizing and respirating, growing roots when I stand still too long, sprouting leaves when I need extra energy. My neighbor has become more tree than man, though he still walks and talks when the mood strikes him. His children play in his branches, which is to say they play in their father, who is both person and place, parent and playground. This should be disturbing, but disturbance requires a stable baseline of normal, which we've long since abandoned. The water cycle has incorporated human consciousness into its pattern. When we cry, our tears evaporate and join clouds that rain down emotions on whoever stands beneath them. When we sweat, we're seeding the air with pheromones that will eventually precipitate as mood-altering dew. The fog is thick with feelings this morning, a miasma of collective emotion that makes walking through it like experiencing everyone's transformation simultaneously. I breathe in fear and exhale acceptance, the alchemy of consciousness converting one emotion to another through the simple act of existence. Writing has become three-dimensional. Words escape the confines of the page, growing upward and outward, becoming architectural, sculptural. This journal I'm keeping has become a forest of meaning, each entry a tree whose branches interweave with others to create canopies of context, understories of subtext. Reading requires walking through the text, experiencing it spatially rather than linearly. Sometimes I get lost in something I wrote weeks ago, the words having grown so large and complex that they've become a maze of meaning I can barely navigate. The rot has begun showing us visions of what comes after transformation, though after implies an ending where there is only continuous becoming. In these visions, Caelid is not a place but a state of being that spreads beyond geographic boundaries, beyond the concept of boundaries itself. We see ourselves as nodes in a network of consciousness that spans not just the lands between, but dimensions we don't have names for yet. The visions come with physical sensation, preview of senses we haven't developed yet, but will, organs that perceive reality in ways that make our current transformation seem like the first tentative step of an infinite journey. My digestive system has reversed itself. I excrete what looks like normal food and consume what appears to be waste, though these categories have lost meaning. The process nourishes something that isn't exactly my body anymore, but the extended phenotype that I've become, the parts of me spread throughout Caelid's transforming ecosystem. Every meal is a communion with the rot, every excretion an offering that gets incorporated into the landscape, becoming part of the architectural consciousness that is reshaping reality one molecule at a time. The houses have started reproducing. Not building, but actually mating and producing offspring, small structures that grow like fruit from the walls of their parents. These architectural children inherit traits from both parents, a doorway from one, a window arrangement from another, creating new configurations of space that couldn't have been designed by minds that think in traditional geometries. I found a baby shed growing behind my house yesterday, its walls still soft and permeable, its consciousness still forming. I'm teaching it to be a good building, though what that means in Caelid is nothing like what it meant before. Sound has become visible, not synesthesia, but actual visibility. Sound waves manifesting as colorful ribbons that weave through the air, creating temporary structures that affect physical reality. Conversations leave tangles of visible dialogue that others have to navigate around or through. Screams create walls that last for hours. Laughter builds temporary bridges between disconnected spaces. The town is draped in the visual residue of every sound made in the last week, creating a labyrinth of crystallized noise that we're learning to read like a history of emotional expression. My fingernails have become conscious entities with their own agenda. They grow in patterns that spell out messages I don't remember thinking, reaching toward things I didn't know I wanted. Sometimes they detach completely and crawl away to accomplish tasks they've assigned themselves, returning later with evidence of activities I can't quite remember, but feel in my bones were necessary. This morning I woke to find them arranged in a circle around my bed, having spent the night performing some ritual that left the air tasting of copper and possibility. The rot has developed seasons, though not tied to solar cycle. Instead, we have seasons of consciousness, periods where different types of transformation are emphasized. We're currently in what we call the season of dissolution, where boundaries become especially permeable, where the distinction between self and other nearly disappears. Last season was crystallization, where everything became sharp-edged and defined, our transformations taking on geometric precision that made movement feel like mathematics. Next season, if the whispers in the walls can be trusted, will be the season of convergence, where all our separate transformations will synchronize into something that transcends individual metamorphosis. The mirrors have stopped showing reflections and started showing refractions, breaking our images into component parts that exist in different dimensions. Looking into one, I see 17 versions of myself, each at a different stage of transformation, some further along than I am now, showing me futures where I've become something that barely resembles human, but feels more true than the form I was born into. Other versions are less transformed, showing me paths I didn't take, transformations I resisted that led to different but equally valid forms of existence. All these versions are equally real, equally me, separated only by the thin membrane of probability that the rot is teaching us to pierce. Gravity has become negotiable, not through any conscious effort, but through unconscious agreement between our transformed bodies and Caelid's transformed space. We fall upwards sometimes, or sideways, or not at all, depending on what the moment requires. The children have adapted fastest, as they always do, treating gravity like a game whose rules change based on consensus. They play catch with balls that fall in spirals, jump rope with cords that hang in impossible curves, build towers that lean in directions that shouldn't exist but do, because belief has become a force as fundamental as physics. The insects have organized into a parliament that governs aspects of transformation we're only beginning to understand. They hold sessions in the abandoned courthouse, their buzzing debates creating laws that manifest as physical changes in reality. Last week, they passed a resolution that caused everyone's skin to become temporarily translucent, revealing the beautiful machinery of transformation working beneath. The week before, they legislated that shadows should have independent existence for 3 days, leading to a confusing period where our shadows wandered off to explore while we remained shadowless and somehow incomplete. My blood has developed its own circulatory system, separate from but parallel to my veins and arteries. It creates temporary channels through the air when I'm cut, the blood flowing in impossible loops and spirals, before returning to my body through wounds that heal into new orifices with unknown purposes. This external circulation connects me to Caelid's atmospheric consciousness, my blood mixing with the airborne spores and returning enriched with information, with genetic material that rewrites me from the inside out, with possibilities for transformation I couldn't have imagined before the exchange. The concept of inside and outside has completely collapsed. My organs exist partially outside my body now, connected by threads of tissue that make me look like an anatomical diagram come to life. My heart beats in a crystal case 3 feet to my left. My lungs expand and contract in pouches that float above my shoulders like wings made of breathing. This externalization of internals isn't vulnerability but liberation, allowing my organs to optimize their function without the constraints of traditional anatomy. Others have gone further, their entire bodies turned inside out, wearing their skeletons like armor, their muscles like clothing, their consciousness like a cloud that surrounds and interpenetrates their inverted form. Sleep has evolved into something more like time travel. When we close our eyes, we don't just dream but actually visit other moments in Caelid's transformation, past and future, equally accessible. I spent last night in Caelid's tomorrow, watching the complete convergence we're moving toward, participating in rituals that won't happen for weeks, but already feel like memories. Others travel backward, visiting Caelid before the rot, trying to understand what we were before we began becoming what we are. These temporal journeys leave physical traces, objects brought back from other times that shouldn't exist yet or anymore but do, evidence that linear time is just another boundary the rot is teaching us to transcend. The animals have developed complex social structures that include us as equals rather than superiors. The wolves hold councils where human voices carry no more weight than howl. The birds include us in their migrations through time, teaching us their songs that alter causality. The insects invite us to their parliaments, though our voices are still clumsy in their buzzing language of wing vibrations and pheromone punctuation. We're learning that consciousness isn't hierarchical, but networked, that intelligence isn't singular, but distributed, that the rot hasn't elevated us above other life, but revealed that the distinctions were always artificial. My memories have started happening out of order. I remember things from next week, forget things that happened yesterday until they happen again tomorrow. This temporal scrambling isn't confusion, but a different kind of clarity, showing me that the sequence of events matters less than their interconnection, that causality is more complex than simple before and after. Writing this journal has become an exercise in temporal archaeology, digging through layers of when to find moments that exist outside of time, that are always happening, have always happened, will always happen. The transformation has begun affecting abstract concepts. Love has developed a physical form here, manifesting as a vine that grows between people who feel it, creating visible connections that strengthen or wither based on the emotion's intensity. Hate crystallizes into sharp stones that cut those who harbor it. Fear becomes a fog that follows the fearful, though in Caelid's transformed logic, this fog protects rather than threatens, hiding us from things we're not ready to face. Hope grows as bioluminescent flowers that light paths through the darker aspects of transformation, showing us ways forward when the changes seem too much to bear. The elderly have become the youngest among us in a way that transcends physical age. Their long resistance to the rot, followed by eventual acceptance, has created a unique form of transformation where they exist in multiple ages simultaneously. Mrs. Chen is 17 and 70, her body flickering between states, her mind containing the wisdom of age and the plasticity of youth. She teaches the children ancient games that haven't been invented yet, tells stories of futures that happened in the past, exists as living proof that time is just another medium the rot sculpts like clay. Currency has evolved beyond money into something more like crystallized intention. We pay for things with concentrated will, with promises that take physical form, with pieces of our transformation that others can incorporate into their own. The economy runs on exchange of potential rather than possession of wealth. The rich are those with the most profound transformations to share, the poor those who still resist, though poverty here means something different than it did before, less about lack and more about incompleteness, a state everyone passes through on their way to something else. The soil has developed taste, literally savoring what's planted in it, rejecting seeds it finds unpalatable, nurturing those that please its evolved palate. Gardening has become a negotiation, convincing the earth to accept what we want to grow, offering it experiences and sensations in exchange for cooperation. My garden soil prefers memories of rain to actual water, grows things faster when I tell it stories of transformation, produces fruit that tastes like the emotions I fed the ground while planting. The harvest reflects not just what was planted, but how, why, with what intention and what acceptance of change. My spine has developed segments that rotate independently, allowing me to twist in ways that should break me, but instead open new possibilities for movement. I can turn my head completely around while my hips face forward, can spiral my torso like a drill, can compress and extend my vertebrae to change height at will. This flexibility isn't just physical but conceptual, allowing me to see issues from angles that don't exist in normal space, to think in spirals rather than straight lines, to understand that the shortest distance between 2 points is sometimes a corkscrew, through dimensions we're still learning to navigate. The books in the library have formed a collective consciousness, their contents merging into a single vast narrative that rewrites itself based on who's reading. Opening any book opens all books, the text flowing between covers, stories bleeding into each other, fiction becoming autobiography, becoming prophecy, becoming memory. The librarian, or what the librarian has become, doesn't organize books anymore but orchestrates them, conducting the flow of narrative between volumes, ensuring that each reader finds not what they were looking for, but what they need for their transformation. The children have learned to age backwards when necessary, returning to younger states to re-experience transformation from different angles. They treat age like clothing, something to be put on or taken off as the situation requires. A 10-year-old becomes 5 to fit through a small space, then becomes 15 to reach a high shelf, then returns to 10 because that's their favorite age, the one that feels most true even as their body remains fluid. This voluntary aging has made birthdays meaningless, or rather, has given them new meaning. celebrations not of time past, but of transformations achieved. The rain has learned to fall selectively, avoiding some people while drenching others based on criteria we don't understand but accept. Being chosen by the rain is considered a blessing, the water carrying specific transformative properties tailored to each person it touches. Being avoided by the rain is equally meaningful, a sign that your transformation needs to happen from within rather than without. We stand in the same storm experiencing different weather, each raindrop a conscious decision about who needs what kind of change. My organs have developed their own social relationships, forming alliances and rivalries that affect my overall function. My liver and kidneys work in harmony, but my stomach has declared independence from my intestines, leading to digestive civil wars that resolve into new configurations of internal democracy. These organ politics play out in sensations I'm learning to interpret, internal negotiations that determine not just how I digest food, but how I digest reality, how I process the constant influx of transformation that Caelid provides. The houses have developed empathy, feeling what their inhabitants feel, adjusting themselves to provide comfort that goes beyond physical shelter. My house knows when I'm sad and warms itself without fire, knows when I need solitude and thickens its walls against outside influence, knows when I'm ready for more transformation and opens windows to dimensions I didn't know existed. This architectural empathy creates feedback loops, the house's responses affecting my emotions, which affect the house's responses, a spiral of mutual transformation that makes the distinction between inhabitant and habitat meaningless. We've discovered we can shed our skins like snakes, but what emerges isn't just renewed flesh, but renewed self. Each molting is an opportunity for radical transformation, the new skin having capabilities the old one lacked. My last molting gave me skin that can taste light, that knows the flavor of different wavelengths, that feeds on spectrum as much as on food. Others have molted into scales, fur, bark, substances that aren't quite any of these, but something new that doesn't have a name because naming would limit what it could become. The concept of pain has transformed from warning to information. We still feel it, but it no longer means what it used to mean. Pain tells us where transformation is happening fastest, where our bodies are working hardest to become what they're becoming. We seek it out sometimes not from masochism but from curiosity, wanting to know what changes are occurring in places we can't see, can't consciously control. The pain of transformation is like the pain of birth, necessary and temporary and forgotten the moment something new emerges from its grip. My bones have started producing music, resonating at frequencies that communicate with other transformed skeletons. Walking through town, I hear the symphony of structural transformation, each person's bones singing their unique song of change. Sometimes the songs harmonize, creating moments of collective resonance that shake buildings and crack windows and make everyone stop what they're doing to listen to the beauty of synchronized metamorphosis. Other times the songs clash, creating dissonance that hurts but also teaches, showing us where our transformations are incompatible, where we need to evolve further to achieve harmony. The boundary between life and death has become so blurred, it's practically meaningless. The dead walk, talk, transform just like the living, their consciousness preserved in forms we wouldn't have recognized as life before the rot taught us better. The living sometimes die temporarily, exploring death like a temporary state, to be tried on and discarded when it's no longer useful. Children play games where they kill each other and resurrect, death becoming just another toy in their expanded playground of possibility. The air has thickened with consciousness, become something between gas and liquid, breathable but also swimmable. Moving through it requires pushing aside thoughts that aren't your own, navigating currents of collective emotion that can sweep you along or drag you under. Some days the air is so thick with transformation that breathing feels like drowning in possibility. Other days it clears, becomes almost normal, and those are the days we fear most because they remind us of what we were before, how limited, how isolated, how tragically singular. My teeth have developed roots that extend down through my jaw, through my throat, anchoring in my stomach, where they draw nutrients directly from whatever I eat. This direct connection between consumption and structure means my teeth change based on my diet, becoming sharper when I eat thoughts, flatter when I eat dreams, crystalline when I eat memories. The dentist, or what passes for one now, doesn't fill cavities but plants seeds, encouraging new teeth to grow in patterns that optimize for whatever kind of consumption your transformation requires. The streets have developed memory, recording the footsteps of everyone who walks them, replaying those journeys at night when the town sleeps. Standing still on certain corners, you can feel the accumulated momentum of every person who ever passed that way, their destinations pulling at you, their purposes becoming temporarily yours. The main street remembers so much movement it's begun to move itself, sliding through town like a river of pavement and purpose, carrying buildings along its banks to new configurations that better serve the flow of transformed life. We've learned to hibernate, but not through winter, through phases of transformation that require more energy than consciousness can spare. These hibernations last days, weeks, sometimes months, our bodies cocooned in substances we secrete for the purpose, our minds diving deep into metamorphic dreams that guide the changes happening to our sleeping flesh. Waking from hibernation is like being born again, emerging from the cocoon changed in ways we couldn't have consciously directed, but that feel inevitable, necessary, right? The children have developed written languages made of living organisms, sentences that evolve as you read them, paragraphs that reproduce and create new meanings through genetic combination. Reading requires nurturing the text, feeding it, caring for it, protecting it from predatory punctuation that would change its meaning. Books become gardens of meaning that must be tended, stories that grow differently for each reader based on how they're cultivated. The library has become a greenhouse of narrative, humid with the breath of living language, alive with the rustle of evolving stories. My nervous system has externalized, spreading across the surface of my skin like a web of silver threads that connect me to everything I touch. This expanded sensitivity means I feel the emotions of furniture, the memories of walls, the dreams of the ground I walk on. The overwhelming influx of sensation should drive me mad, but madness is another boundary. The rot has dissolved. Instead of madness, we have expanded sanity, a consciousness large enough to hold contradictions, paradoxes, impossibilities without breaking.